today we are not having a person back on the podcast, but we have an organization back on the podcast. And the guest today is Greg. And Greg's going to tell a bit more about himself in a moment. But actually what I thought was really interesting, picking up on this conversation and actually listening to the first conversation I did with Harsha, that is the founder back in 2019 in Soho in London, was actually that we're already in almost 6 years on. And there's so much happened in the industry and the world, but they're still there. And they're still there as a force for good, Saira, trying to make the industry better little by little every day. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. You know, what is status quo and some of the challenges within the industry and how Saira is actually still working very, very hard on helping people get into great jobs in hospitality. Welcome to the show, Greg. It's an absolutely pleasure to have you here today.
Likewise, the pleasure is all mine. Great to see you.
Greg, just for people to get a bit of context about who Saira is and how you got involved in making hospitality a better place to work in and your journey and so on. Could you just share a bit?
Of course, yeah. So I'll try and do a quick intro to Saira Hospitality before I go into myself and how I became involved in the organization. Saira Hospitality has been around for about 10 years, and it was founded by a true hospitality maverick in my eyes, and someone who's been on the podcast, of course, Harsha L'Acqua. Harsha had a very simple but quite revolutionary idea about 10 years ago, which was she had worked in luxury hospitality for many years, and she'd seen some of the kind of issues that had been kind of adopted as industry best practices or the only practices when it came to hiring and kind of sourcing entry-level team members. She used to work a lot with kind of luxury resorts that would be, popping up in beautiful, very rural, remote destinations around the world. And she realized that the hiring model that they adopted was pretty much broken, or at least could be massively improved upon in many ways. And essentially, she saw that these new resorts did one of two things when it came to hiring their entry-level teams. They would either fly people in from overseas who'd had some luxury service experience or had some training in hospitality, or they would pinch and poach from existing operators nearby and just take their entry-level talent because it was kind of the easy way, and it's something that, their competitors had done and their competitors before them. And Harsha looked at this and stopped and thought and realized also that there was such a huge local community outside of these, resort destination hotels who could be fantastic and could massively, benefit from having a career in hospitality, but were so often being overlooked. So she came up with a super simple concept of creating this pop-up hospitality school model. So partnering with hotels, usually between 6 and 4 months before they open their doors, and then becoming their kind of dedicated partner on the ground who would source local community members who really wanted and needed this opportunity, and then putting them through a training program that was very focused on, or is very focused on, life skills development with operational and kind of experiential skills, and then placing them with those hotels when they open their doors. She, what Harsh is like, she's a bit of a joker, and you've got a great wit about her, and it's quite funny because we won an award a few years ago for the best new concept, and she had to kind of video in with an acceptance speech, and she was like, this isn't a new concept or an even special concept, it's just something that everybody should be doing. Like, why are we not hiring local people and supporting the communities where we're sometimes just implanting this luxury product in a destination where that's like an alien coming to land for so many of those local communities, and it brings with it so many great things for the well-heeled luxury traveler, but all too often the local community don't see any of the benefits there. So yeah, pretty revolutionary idea, both for the operators, because it gives them a fantastic way to find great talent who've been screened and trained and, put through their paces, but also clearly the reason we exist is to support those local communities who, want and need the opportunity. So when I heard about Saira Hospitality, I mean, how could you say no to that, coming on board and helping with that as a kind of global mission? And Harsha and I met in 2021, so it was kind of tail end of COVID times, and we were connected by a friend, a kind of mutual friend, Shout out to Katie Sharples. Big thank you again. And yeah, I was just coming off the back of kind of running my own nonprofit, which was not too dissimilar to Saira Hospitality in that it was very much focused on using hospitality and hotels as a force for good during COVID. And yeah, so I was kind of already in this kind of philosophical mindset about how the industry can be used to, support individuals, to give back. And so when I came and kind of was introduced to Harsha, it was a bit of a no-brainer to start working with her and seeing how we could develop the model that she'd already been doing for about 7 years.
And what is your role, Greg, in this venture now, or in the organization? What is typically your role? You're based out of London, but what is your role within that?
Yeah, so based out of London, I'm the Chief Operating Officer and also the Director of the UK entity. So we have two entities at Saira Hospitality. We have a 501c3 nonprofit, which is incorporated in the US. And then we also have a community interest company, which is incorporated here in the UK. So I came on board at a time when Harsha was really looking for a way to bring her impact to London for the first time and to cities for the first time. Because as I mentioned, she had previously just been working in very remote, very rural destinations. And I think I did some homework and listened to the podcast that you did with her just to make sure I was up to speed on what you guys talked about. And it was actually amazing to hear her speak then, because for anyone listening who hasn't, I would definitely recommend going back and checking out the episode, because it's really interesting hearing her speak about that being her ambition at the time. You guys spoke in 2019. Yep. She was saying that she would, love to find a way to change the model and develop it so she could start working in cities for the first time and, more densely populated areas. And so when I was introduced to her, that was very much the plan that she had. She was bringing that to fruition. And yeah, I was kind of right place, right time. I was also looking for a new opportunity. And like I say, I had this experience of setting up my own nonprofit already in the UK. So it was the stars aligned, if you will. And so I came on to take this global concept and bring it to the first city, which is London. And it was a really, probably the most challenging, for sure, insightful, kind of life-changing experience for me to be the one that had the opportunity to do that. I've had some experience in hospitality and hotels myself. I've worked in kind of brand partnerships for travel companies. I'd set my own little nonprofit up, but truthfully, I hadn't ever done anything in the training space. I wouldn't label us as a recruitment business, but when you look at what we do, there is clearly a component in that. But for me, I had no learning and development experience, no kind of people and culture experience. So one of those things that you kind of look at the job spec and think, I'm super passionate about this concept, and it might take me a bit of time to get going, but yeah, very, very worthy cause that she's created, and it's a bit of an honor to be able to have brought it over to the UK for the first time.
And is the mission still the same? Because when I talked with Harsha, was this the founder and the visionary, I would say, in this venture, and very, very clear about the change she wants to create in the world. Would you say it's the same and just been extended now with more different, you can say, concepts to make that mission happen in the world?
Yeah, the core philosophy of why we exist is still the same, to educate and empower local communities. But I think that geographical change that we've had over the past 3.5 years has really allowed us to kind of innovate how we do that. Working in those very rural destinations. So for some context, Harsha, before I came on board, had worked in destinations like Namibia, the British Virgin Islands, Mexico. So kind of that kind of local community side of things there was super important, because as we say, the concepts of trying to steer operators away from flying people in from overseas when they can just hire local and train local was clearly very, very needed. But then here in London, I think it's interesting talking about local communities in London because it's, it's such a huge kind of diverse pool of individuals from all over the world. And, certainly the students on the programs that we run now in London aren't necessarily, born and raised locals from London. We work with so many different demographics. And I think that's the key change that we've had here in London is the talent that we're working with. In London, we have the opportunity to partner with other nonprofits, which is really important to me. And it's something that Harsha was really passionate about. I say we're fortunate to be able to do that. Clearly, it would be better if there weren't so many nonprofits that were trying to help these communities because, ideally, they wouldn't be needed. But because they are needed, we're able to tap into and kind of create really close relationships with everyone from Care for Calais to crisis, shelter, breaking barriers, supporting people who've had a lived experience of homelessness, people who've come to this country as refugees, and people with neurodiversity. London was very much, when we were bringing it to this market, it felt like that was the big kind of puzzle that we were trying to bring to life was, just how many of these amazing nonprofits can we try and onboard so that we're almost this kind of aggregator of charities and nonprofits and hospitality businesses, and we're kind of the connecting point between the two. So the Care for Calais, the breaking barriers, they refer the candidates through to our team. We then screen them to make sure that they're kind of ready to go onto this journey with us because the schools that we run in London are 4 weeks long. They're 5 days a week, 5 hours a day. So it's not, you can't just come on these programs as a whim. You need to make sure that the candidate's ready, their background is kind of reinforced enough that they don't have too much of the distractions going on so that they can really focus on the learning and they can focus on getting that job at the end. So it's been amazing. And I think, every day I'm very thankful that we have the opportunity to connect with these amazing businesses and nonprofits that are doing so much great work. We're able to be a small part of their pipeline as well.
If you put a bit of what do you call them, labels or concepts on what you're working with, that we can maybe just nail it down to the London operation, saying what is it that you're working with to help operators to, first of all, attract and recruit and retain better quality talent?
I think the one of the big issues that we hear about and see when we speak to operators at the moment is that it can be really, really difficult to kind of get to the nucleus of where is the great talent coming from, because so many job applications are coming in at the moment. It's actually crazy compared to when I first started in late 2021. I was speaking to hotels and they were crying out for anyone to be applying for roles because, as we know, it was COVID. Brexit had happened not too kind of earlier in the time that I came with the project. And looking at that time and looking at today, it's actually the complete opposite. There's now, I'll never say too many applications, but hotels and restaurants are overwhelmed by how many people are applying for positions. And I think that's happened, from my understanding and from my conversations, I believe that's happened as a bit of we've almost caused our own chaos here, because we've all reverted to this one-click apply philosophy and this instant apply philosophy where it's never been easier to apply for a role. Press a button and a candidate can apply for hundreds of jobs in one day if they just sat behind a laptop and just tap. Does that mean you're getting candidates who are coming through who are really interested in your particular business or your particular hotel or restaurant, or are they just playing the fields? No wrong on their side of things. They're just trying to get a job. But it means that then the whole process becomes very arduous and very backlogged. And I think operators are getting a bit burnt out because there's so many CVs to sift through. And how do you tell which CV is actually going to lead to a great candidate? And I'd say that, clearly the reason that we exist is to support, the more marginalized side of the communities who typically would be overlooked for whatever reason. But the strength that we have when we work with operators is that we've done that kind of initial screening process, and we found individuals who really need and want the opportunity. Our candidates are not sending out hundreds of job applications a day because they might not even know where to start. So where it's much more of a hand-holding situation, where throughout the period of that 4-week training program, we're really making sure that the candidates that we have on our schools are aligned to the operators that we're working with. Sometimes we work with multiple hotels and restaurants per program. Sometimes we work with just one. But either way, I think one of the benefits that we bring to the whole equation is that we've screened these individuals. You know that they're coming from a place that they really, really need this opportunity. So I don't think that recruitment really is, because it's such a dire need for everyone. I feel like not that many people see it as a great opportunity to enrich, their actual philosophies and their ESG or any of the other buzzwords. But really, by partnering with the right organizations, whether it's with us or whether it's one of the other, fantastic nonprofits doing similar work with hospitality businesses, there is a really, really easy way for operators to help people to change their lives and to find great talent. So that's the strength that we see. And yeah, we want as many operators to think that way as well.
And do you think also, because I guess what you're doing here, and you can correct me if this is different, Greg, is that you're making it a bit harder to get a job, but also you're making very clear what kind of organization they're joining, because they're working with you. So that you already know, okay, this is definitely different because this is a different way in. Is that a true experience operators see as well as a benefit working with you and on the recruitment piece?
I'd say for our candidates, we make it much easier for them to get the job if they're able to be patient and go through the process with us. Because the process is, yes, it's the strength of the relationships that we hold with hotels and restaurants in London, but really all of the great work that we do is fully centered around the strength and the quality of the curriculum. We teach experiential and we teach kind of, the hands-on side of hospitality. But really my belief is that the core strength that we have in our curriculum is just how well tuned the life skills modules are to help our recruits and our candidates to kind of not just survive when they get into the industry, but to really thrive when they get there. We're going super deep into everything from, the basics on communication and verbal, non-verbal, written, all of those things. But then really drilling down into things like triggers. What is a trigger? How do you respond when you've been triggered? How can you make sure that doesn't impact the rest of your working day? Because if I wish that I had been taught that when I worked in hotels when I was younger, because I used to have this one, it was a group of gentlemen. I'll say the word gentlemen with gritted teeth. But for whatever reason, they just really did not take a shine to me. And it was like a corporate business group, and they used to come to the hotel that I worked in. I think it was once a quarter. Felt way more often at the time. It was probably once every 3 months. And every time they just made my day or my shift absolute hell on earth. Really just not very nice. And I used to take that home with me. Every time I'd finish my shift and think, I'm not good enough, or, what's going on here? And I think that's an experience that so many of us go through. But the demographic that we're working with, I think it can be really the barrier between quitting the job and never coming back, or understanding what a trigger is, understanding how it affects you, understanding that a lot of the time it might not be your fault that this person is treating you this way. But so the curriculum, I'm going a little bit off tangents, but the curriculum goes into all of those really important details in hospitality that I think people don't have. People aren't equipped to that if they're applying for a job in the industry for the first time. They've never worked in an environment before where it's, what hospitality is like in terms of, it's so rapid. And especially if you are working in luxury or lifestyle, which we do, we also partner with kind of mid-scale and economy products as well. But I think we make it, to answer your question, we make it much easier for the candidates to get the job at the end. But it's a longer process. They have to be patient. Like we say, it's a 4-week training program. Our screening window usually is about 8 weeks before the school begins. So we might meet a candidate on the first day of the 8-week screening period, and then they don't graduate for another 12 weeks. So it's like a long time. But really, once they come out of that process, we feel like they are much more equipped. And again, on the operator side, the benefit there is that suddenly you're interviewing someone who has potentially waited 12 weeks to have an interview with you, Hotel A or Restaurant A. So you're not meeting someone who's sat on the laptop and just clicked apply 20 times. You've got someone who's super committed. You know, they've taken their time to come to the training program for so long. And I think the confluence of those two things is really our strength. And I think, you know, as we become more and more reliant on AI, which I don't think is a bad thing. I think there were good and bad things, but I think we can incorporate AI into a lot of things. I haven't seen a great way to screen a candidate with AI yet. I think I much prefer our way, which is meeting them face to face, matching them with a hotel, having the hotels come in and speak to the candidates and get the chance to understand what they're all about. You know, I think that for me is super important. And I understand, I'm not saying that everyone's going to be able to do this because, as we say, there are so many applications. We need to find a way to screen them somehow and segment them somehow. But I just think what we're doing, it's very analog. It's not particularly 2024 in a way, 2025 even. You can tell I've got a young daughter at home because I still think it's 2024. But I think, I think that's the strength in what we offer. It is quite analog, but so much care goes in from the end-to-end process that I think that's really the benefit that we're bringing.
So yeah, but like many people probably thinking, because one of the things I was putting my operator hat on as I was listening to you. So there's a couple of questions around the journey. So yeah, 12 weeks is a long time. What type of candidate comes to join this program? Because I guess they need a job and, you know, and they need to make some money quite quickly. And that's typical what you see an hourly paid can take time off for 3 months to wait. Well, what typical is the journey for a candidate? So you get a bit of a feel, who are they and what do they do in the interim? Because I guess there is time on the side to go and earn money, but we're very focusing on my ultimate outcome is to get a great job in hospitality.
Yeah. So the candidates on our 4-week programs they're always unemployed. So they're not working kind of, side jobs. And again, that's because we really want to spend our time supporting candidates who are struggling to get work. We certainly probably could, in some ways, help candidates who are already employed to upskill or anything like that. But we really like to focus our full 4-week programs on the individuals who are really struggling to get that employment. So, the vast majority of the candidates will be on some kind of state benefit while they're going through the program. I wish we had the funding to be able to somehow contribute to the learner's journey. A lot of investment from our side goes into the program itself, which you could argue is a benefit to the client in a different way, or the candidate in a different way. But yeah, so they're not paid during the program. It's something that we're not able to do. But again, I think it says something about the candidates who are on the program that they are, they need the opportunity, they need the training, they need that to break down the initial barrier of, whatever reason that they're not being hired or getting to an interview. So yeah, it can be a long process for sure. But I think, that's why we're mostly working with people who they need this. This is something that it's going to struggle maybe to get a job without that.
Yeah, and I guess also they need to hunger somehow. What a typical if you just like in top line would take us through, what skills do you give them? Because there's these baseline skills, no matter which job. You mentioned communication was one of them, which exactly a lot of people don't know when they go into the workplace. That's definitely my own experience, had lots to do with younger people as well. Communicating, presenting, collaborating with others. It's not something you learn because the schools are focusing on it, but not in a work environment as you grow up. So could you talk a bit about what exactly from some hard, or you call them soft skills, but life skills is probably a better word. What are the key skills these people are getting, and what benefits do the operators see when they get them on the other side?
Yeah. to pick up on what I think is a very important little comment you made there, I completely agree. Soft skills is not it's not the right word for this. They are life skills, and they're some of the most important skills in hospitality. So leadership. We have a leadership module for all of our students, because we believe that you don't have to be the general manager or the duty manager or the supervisor to show great leadership skills and have those great leadership skills be seen by your colleagues and your peers. We have a really big section, of course, on things like service recovery, making the best first impression, all of those pieces that, again, if you've never worked inside a service industry before, they maybe haven't been so important, but as we know in hospitality, they are vital. We really, the premise and the kind of early start and stages of the curriculum is just focusing on what is hospitality as an industry, because again, 99% of the candidates had never worked in the industry before. So, we'll bring in guest speakers from different brands, and they can come in and talk about, how their style of hospitality is different. We talk about, lifestyle versus, boutique hotels versus, more kind of chains and corporate groups. We have a really amazing, one of my favorite modules is called Building Your Own Brand. And that's more, goes quite deep into kind of self-reflection, making a bit of a pipeline for yourself and understanding where you'd like to be in the future, which I think kind of progression planning is something that I think is super important for any industry, but certainly for our candidates who do want to try and turn this into a career for themselves. We like to try and bring that into the very start of the program to make sure that they are they can kind of understand what their skill sets are existing before we start to layer things on top. And then start to look at, okay, well, what kind of role might be right for me? Because again, we have candidates who they're not coming to us thinking, I really want to work in F&B as a commie waiter. They're thinking, I really like people and I want to, be more integrated into, communities and things like that. And hospitality is a great way to do that. So we kind of look at their skill sets, what they've done in the past, and we try and help them kind of plot out what that path might be. And then building your brand is also about, really important when we get to the interview stage, how you kind of pitch yourself effectively, how you can really clearly, bring your personality to the interview, but also hopefully when you get that job at the end, how you can bring your personality to the brand that you're going to work with. Because, I think we all agree that's one of the best things about working in hospitality is you have, moments, especially front of house and back of house, but lots of front of house opportunities with guests where you can really bring your own personality to the brand. And I think, we celebrate that with a lot of different businesses these days. So trying to kind of bring those concepts to the individuals as well.
And what are typical the experience you have from the operators that you can maybe use an example of somebody you work very close with, and what are some of the outcomes they get out of this? Of course, they get talent into the business. They get, at some point, it was just about getting some people to do the job, but actually, as you say now, the world is changing, and it's actually about finding the right candidate now more than anything else. Also, you are struggling more for every penny you have to work for in the industry. As it's the hardest time ever, probably for many.
Yeah, and I think that the benefits of working with Saira Hospitality, there are many of them. Lovely recent experience we've had would be with the One Hotel Mayfair. We worked with them really closely last year, and they came on board initially as kind of an experience provider for the students. So we love to do kind of integration experiences, we call them, throughout the program. So, we do a walking tour or a hotel tour, not necessarily walking, but a hotel tour in London where we'll visit various different properties in one day, and we'll go and have the opportunity to meet with, different key roles and individuals inside those hotels. And we worked with the One Hotel Mayfair on that, and they did such an amazing job. They kind of pulled out all the stops. We had a group of maybe 7 or 8 students come and visit. And they toured around the different departments. Francois, the general manager, showed them around, and it was like it was just hospitality kind of great hospitality personified, where, we'd walk into the bar, and the bar manager would be there with a couple of his team, and they would each tell them about, how it works, what a day in the life would look like. And then they'd move on to the kitchen and so on and so forth. And we had a student who was on the tour who, just fell in love with the property, the amount of care and kind of generosity that had obviously been shown by all of the team members along the way, and so we ended up fixing up one of those students with work experience inside the hotel, so they could learn a little bit more about what the One Hotel Mayfair was all about, and then the individual who went through those processes then ended up getting hired there in I think it was October last year. Starting out back of house, because again, not much experience in the past, but starting out back of house. But the hotel has a fantastic progression plan already for this candidate. They've already said we're going to start him in the back of house, and then the plan is to get him onto the front desk. And I think again, the benefit there for the hotel is that they've had so many touch points with that candidate before they then do offer them the role, so they can say, okay, he came along to the kind of walking tour, and he was the one asking questions, and he was super intrigued about the property. That's already a tick. And then he came across the work experience, and I mean, he's a fantastic individual. Worked his socks off, wanted to do as much as he possibly could. So by the time they get to that final interview, there wasn't really a need for the interview, because they've already seen this individual in that environment, and they know that they're going to be a really good fit for them. So I think you look at, this candidate we're talking about at the moment, he's only been there since kind of October last year, but I really believe the turnover rate, I think he's going to stay there for a long time, because I think that they've built this connection so strongly together. And I think, that's the benefit. So, the turnover rate in London for our graduates is about 25% year on year. That's one of the which is interesting, because I came on board, as we talked about, with Saira when it was this global model with a very different operating model, partnering with just one hotel. So when I started, the average turnover rate was kind of between 10 and 13%. And so now I feel almost responsible that it's grown up to 25%. But I mean, I think, if you're talking about London, it's still pretty good. We're always looking for ways to bring that down. But that's really clearly, that's the number that everyone's kind of interested in at the moment, is how can we get people who want to stay for longer. And I think, like you say, the process that we have, because there's so many chances for the team at the hotel, the individual from our student point of view, and the operator and the brand, for them to connect and meet. I think that's a proper relationship. That's something that's going to last, rather than it being one click applies. Obviously, we still have to hire people that haven't been through the Saira Hospitality program. But, I think if operators are looking to support local communities in London, decrease the turnover rate, then it's a good solution. And it's amazing. I don't think we've met a hotel that hasn't, probably individual teams that come in from the hotels to meet with the candidates who don't feel like they also gain something from this as well. They really have the opportunity to impact people's lives in a good way, and you get to meet individuals that otherwise may have never had the opportunity. So I think all around it's something that's super exciting. Still feels like I've only been here for about 6 months. It's crazy, like time's just flown this last 3.5 years. But yeah, we've got some really exciting things in the pipeline as well, working with some newly opening hotels in London, which will be the first time we've done that. We've mostly partnered with existing operations, so we're kind of bringing that global model kind of back to London a little bit soon this year. So yeah, a lot going on. It's all very exciting.
What I thought was really interesting also, because there is the whole engagement factor of doing something like that, and see your employer really put effort in to recruit this way, and actually giving people a chance that would never see. And also, if you look at it as a leader, you want a diverse team, and you might never see that candidate if it was your own process. And therefore, you are getting this, input into your organization that actually helps you build a better organization, more diverse organization. Maybe somebody brings in a skill set, it can both be a technical one, or it could also be a life skill that you didn't have in the team, or an energy that you didn't have in the team. So I think that's really, really interesting because we, no matter how good our recruitment process is, we often hire more of what we already have. And that's just a reality because you're coded in a certain way and think about, okay, for our culture, this works really well, but we don't have enough time with the candidate actually to figure out, could they actually work? We are maybe taking a chance sometimes. So then it doesn't go well and everybody says, oh, I told you so. But that was because they didn't have those skills you trained them in. So I think it's a super interesting way of getting something different into your organization. So over the last 3.5 years, is there any learnings you've done as a leader in this organization that maybe led you to change belief or habit or how you see the industry? Because you met so many interesting candidates from different cultures and different brands and organization and leaders as well.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that comes to mind instantly when you say that is, and it seems really basic, but when I first came in tail end of 2021, it was very much Zoom meetings, Google Meets, it was all very online meetings. And I think there was a real barrier that I came up against when we were trying to speak with hotels that maybe we would be working with and, helping them find great talent, or when we were trying to work with other nonprofits and charities. I feel like the importance of sitting down over a cup of coffee, like as soon as the fear of the kind of COVID waves had slowed down, I think it was probably early 2022 or maybe a few months into 2022, and I was able to actually then go in and meet individuals. That was a massive change for us as an organization. That's when things really started to shift and really started to move.
And if you were then to give an advice to other leaders that want to build an organization that force for good, that could be, either as your own journey as a charity, but also even more important, I think, as operators here, because, everybody wants to do something good, but sometimes getting it started is a bit challenging for them.
Yeah, my advice would definitely be to make some inroads with local nonprofits or charities in your area, set up a meeting, clearly try and, first of all, find an organization that has some relevance to you that you think there may be a crossover with, and just go for a meeting. Because if that initial meeting doesn't turn into, there's a clear way that you could work together, if you ask enough questions of a nonprofit of a charity in London, I honestly believe it's one of the most lovely networks you can get to know, because you speak to one leader of a nonprofit or charity and they'll connect you to two other leaders. And, there's this lovely, sense that people just want to be reconnecting and bringing in conversations from different kind of industries. And I think if you start a conversation within that world, will more often than not lead to somewhere good. You need to be patient. You may need to be creative as well, with the ways that you can work with those organizations. I think the benefit for us is that, we're able to kind of create this aggregation. So we can work with these, dozens and dozens of different nonprofits and understand that, for example, we did a program with St. Giles Hotels last year, and they really wanted to work on a program that was specifically focused on helping previously homeless individuals enter the hospitality workforce. And they had some amazing contacts in that field as well. We also worked really closely with crisis and shelter, and so I think there's certain operators that are looking to do certain things with their ESG and with their CSR. There's almost definitely a nonprofit of some description trying to also do the same thing. So I think there's a really good opportunity there to just get out there, try and book a meeting at the start of your journey and see where it can take you. For us, that's 100% how it started. We had a couple of contacts and now it's grown to dozens and dozens of different people. I think there's a lot of great networking going on in that space. So yeah, I think if you're looking to try and do some more work as a force for good, there are a lot of opportunities out there. It's just about, getting some face time in with the right leaders.
Yeah, I love that, because even a little bit, and sometimes it's actually going, asking them, how can I help you best? And actually sometimes comes up things that's much easier to put into your day-to-day model than you thought it was.
Yeah, exactly.
A bit on you, Greg. Is there any book that has, a number of books, that have greatly influenced, the way you think, you operate your life, and the way you go around doing business with people. You wanted to share with the audience, because the audience, a lot of them are big book lover as myself, and read a lot of books. And books is very popular, especially, recommendations from guests. It doesn't have to be a business book or a leadership book.
You've got a good selection back there behind you, haven't you? Look at those. A lot of good books there. Unreasonable Hospitality, I thought was brilliant. Whether you're in hospitality or not, there's such a level of creativity, thinking outside the box that I just loved about that particular book. That was brilliant. Book that probably most changed my life. A Life on Our Planet by Attenborough, I thought was a fantastic read. I came away with such a visceral sense of wanting to be a much better steward to the earth than maybe I was. I wasn't a bad one, but I think, you read something like that and it frames it wonderfully. The TV show is great as well. I would recommend the book. I thought it was fantastic. I also love Born to Run because before becoming a father, I was a big trail runner, and that inspired me in all sorts of ways. I couldn't put that book down. I thought it was wonderful. I also generally think that some of my best thinking and most kind of creative thinking does happen when I'm out on a run. I know everyone has their different little hacks for how they, invigorate their creativity and how they come up with ideas. But I think for me, it's certainly that. So that book was, I almost think of that as a business book for me personally, because it gets me out, it got me out there and it got me thinking a ton. So yeah, those are three that I'd really recommend.
I love that. Yeah, Unreasonable Hospitality has been mentioned before, but actually Life on Earth, I actually only watched the documentary. That's one that's going to listen. And Born to Run, I've heard about, I've never read as well. So that's definitely one that goes on the list as well. What is the fondest food memory you have or hospitality experience you've had in your life? And what was it and why was it such a great experience?
Oh, some good food ones. I had a really good experience in Indonesia when I was about 20 years old. I went with a couple of friends and we had a day out surfing, and the guy that loaned us the boards, his brother was a fisherman. So while we were out surfing, his brother was out there and he'd caught this, massive tuna. And I was with two other friends, so there was three of us. Me and one friend were both, will eat anything, very, very kind of open. And so obviously the thought of having this tuna when we got back on the beach was just incredible. And one of the friends that I was with was probably the most fussy eater I've ever come across. We'd been in Indonesia for 4 weeks and he was just not trying his hand at anything other than, pasta and pizza, which clearly isn't very Indonesian. Anyway, so the tuna came out and one of our friends was kind of a bit questionable about it. And anyway, he had his first bite and it was probably the first, fresh seafood he's ever had in his entire life, which is crazy to me. And it just changed his world. Like now he's the most, he's no longer that very boxed in individual who wouldn't try new flavors or new dishes or anything like that. And I don't know, it's not necessarily a story about kind of what is my experience, but it's more about just the power of travel to open people's eyes. I kind of saw that, and you see that aha moment right in front of you. And I was like, it was a damn fine tuna as well. I can remember it now. We had it with sea spinach, which I still haven't had again to this day, but it was delightful.
It's delicious, sea spinach. You can actually get it in sea spinach at some beaches here in the UK. You can go and find it. I actually found something at nearby the Brighton beach, which was very interesting. And people don't know how it looks, but it actually almost looks like normally, just bigger. But it's again often great experiences about the people you're with, isn't it? The environment, travel you had in there as well, and then the quality of the food, of course, was exceptional. I can imagine when it comes to Irish salad.
It was delicious.
Yeah. And it's printed into your memory. And that's what I love about these moments. And sometimes we forget that how easy it actually is to create. And he created that moment for you, the guy, and he was very aware of what he was doing, because that was a great ending to a great day. Is there one question you wished I've asked you? And what would that question be? And what would you answer?
That's a good question, actually. I guess a good question for me would be, what do I need to focus on improving at the moment?
Interesting. And what do you need to improve then?
I think the balance of career and family is it's just something that's really on my mind at the moment. I'm newish father of an 8-year-old daughter at home. And I think that, these big life-changing moments make you kind of take stock. And I'm really fortunate that I'm able to have quite flexible schedule, work from home, so spend some good time with the family. But I also think it can be really important to try and switch the brain off. And I think when the role that I have at Saira can be pretty all-consuming in a very good way from a work perspective. But sometimes you can just still, the work voice is still just running away in the background when it's mornings and evenings and weekends. So I think I'm working with a career coach at the moment on kind of, getting those things, trying to silo them as much as possible. Not that I don't like thinking about work, but I think, as you know, sometimes it can be distracting from being present. So yeah, definitely trying to kind of drill down on that at the moment is a big thing in my psyche. Definitely I've already had some improvements, I'd say, in the past kind of 3 months where I've been thinking about it, but I just really don't want to miss a thing. I'm very conscious of, making the most of my daughter at this young age. So yeah, I think that's a big one for me at the moment.
Yeah, and it's so hard because it's again, it's thoughts, and how do you compartmentalize thoughts and ideas and stuff like that. I think like most leaders struggle with this at some point, and actually it's great actually you're trying to take it from the beginning off, because I think it's going to get much easier. And with the first, and then you have more children, it just becomes more complex, and I've moved so fast suddenly. So yeah, I love that.
I could only imagine. More than one must be time consuming.
Well, I know leaders that has 4 children and they still manage. So that's it's all possible. And as long as as one of my very good mentors says, your first job is to love them, then it's to feed them and give them shelter. If you've done that, you're doing a quite good job. So
Nice.
That's the baseline, and then you can always add on. Where can people connect with you, Greg, or learn more about Saira and how to get involved and so on? Where's the best place to go?
Connecting with me would be LinkedIn. The name is Greg Früchtenicht, quite a long one. Maybe you can pop it in the show notes or something, a link to the LinkedIn. Pretty active on there. And SairaHospitality.com, you'll find us there. We are at Saira Hospitality on Instagram. Yet to delve into the world of TikTok, so you won't find us on there. But yeah, mostly LinkedIn, Instagram, and the website would be a good place to start.
Great. Thank you so much, Greg, for coming on the show, sending you and the team power and energy to be a force for good in hospitality and transform lots of people's life as you bring them into hospitality and give them these incredible life and technical skills. Thank you so much for coming.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.